Here we are, patient number 2 in the small engines class. This is a larger, more complicated engine that has a lot more going on. This is a snowblower. Again, it's a Yard machine. This actually is the brand Yard machine, which is a generic brand. A lot of these brands are very similar between Honda and Craftsman. Most of the motors come from a similar manufacturer, if not the same, like Briggs & Stratton for the individual pieces. But this one requires significantly more work than the last one. And the reason being is it's a bigger, more complicated machine. So let's go through the functions first. First of all, this has a 200cc engine, which stands for cubic centimeters. That's the size of that's the size of the cylinder, which is significantly bigger. It's about double that of the small engine that we use. You can see that it's just physically bigger. And it's set up a little bit differently. If you'll notice, if you can get a look in here, the cylinder where combustion happens, which is in here, is on an angle, right? And the spark plug is over here. This has a specific, this OHV right here is overhead valve, which means that the configuration of the motor is different. So it has some of the same capabilities. It's got a choke handles air. It's got throttle is up here, and here, sorry, that's the gears. Up here's the gears, here's the throttle here. So throttle controls fuel, choke controls air. Let's talk about the ignition system. The ignition system here has a primer aperture. This is simply a little pump that takes fuel from the reservoir and puts it into the chamber to prime it so that the spark can happen. Again, it has a pull cord, a recoiling pull cord, in order to start it to create spark, but it also has what's called an electric start. That's this cylinder right here and this mechanism here. This actually plugs into a wall outlet, a regular AC wall outlet, AC wall outlet, and you press this button. The reason being is usually you use a snowblower in very cold weather, and when an engine is really, really cold, the fuel gets cold, and all of the oil is at the bottom of the pan, and it takes a little bit more oomph to start it up. So just using the pull cord can be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get something to start. So what the electric starter does is it gives more juice to generate that spark to ignite the fuel. So think back again to what we talked about on the last engine. The spark plug needs charge from somewhere. That usually comes from your pull cord. Remember, there's a magneto attached to the flywheel that, as it spins, creates charge, goes to the top of the spark plug, which goes down and creates the spark in the chamber. Now, the flywheel, in that mechanism of pulling that, also pulls up some fuel to put in there in order to start it. But this one, being a larger engine, needs more fuel to help it start, especially during cold weather. That's why it has a priming bulb. So you press that, put some fuel in there, primes it up a little bit, then you're going to get a more of consistent, longer spark than just the instantaneous pulling on the cord through this. Now, the problem with this particular unit is this is broken. Why do I know it's broken? Because the last time I used it, you press this button here and there's usually some resistance. There is none, and actually felt it break. I've actually taken this apart and looked inside. So I had to order a replacement unit for that. So also, again, fuel in here, oil. Oil and fuel are separate, which makes it a 4-stroke engine, not a 2-stroke engine. Now let's talk about some of the other things that this machine does. This machine, and excuse me, I need to get a light. This machine has an auger system, as you can see in here. Now here's the deal with the auger system. The auger system itself has a couple different functions. First of all, you'll see right here, this is the auger system that actually rolls, and you'll notice that some of these spin and some do not. This is meant to be spun by the motor. That means the cotter pins right here are broken, so I need to replace those. But if you look back there, well, it looks like a fan that turns this way. So this is 2 parts to this particular mechanism. This part here, the auger is going to bring this in to the chute, and that'll spin this way and shoot everything out this way. So it's got a lot more going on than just a simple shredder. In addition, this one is self-propelled. It actually has, the engine will actually put power to the wheels in order to go. So there's a transmission system, because you have to identify where power is going to go from the motor after the chemical energy of the chemical explosion of combustion creates power. Then you have to send it somewhere. That's what these handles are for. And I can turn my light off now. These handles here, one is for motion, the other runs the auger. Why do they have this? Because pushing this through the snow is really a pain. Now, this is a pretty big snow blower, and that's because I used to live in western New York, where we would get 2 feet of snow at a time, and you need something large like this in order to work. It's also the reason why the engine is larger, and it has significantly more torque, because that much snow to throw it requires much more energy. So first, you need to be able to start it. So there's beefed up mechanisms to start the engine. Secondly, the engine needs to be bigger and more powerful just to run both the dual process of the auger and the thrower, as well as motion. So you need to have a transmission system and a set of gears. There are 6 different gears that control forward motion and 2 in reverse. So the gearing mechanisms inside the motor are also significantly more complicated and then the last one we had. But a lot of the service is still very similar. What we're going to do, change out the fluid, change out the oil, change out the spark plug, which takes care of getting the engine started. We need to replace the electric starter kit. We need to replace the cotter pins on the front auger and generally do a little bit of a cleanup to the overall unit and get it running. Now, this particular engine has not been run in several years. Unfortunately, in western New York, you get 2 feet of snow once a year, twice a year. Then this is a really big item to use after that. So this has been used maybe a dozen times in the 6-7 years that I have owned it, and all I have done to it is replace the spark plug. Also, in here, we've got an air filter, and there's actually a fuel filter in here, because a larger engine, this is your exhaust port, a larger engine requires the fuel to be clean, so there's a fuel filter. Now, whereas the other engine was pretty much accessible, this one has all this housing mechanism to protect it, so I got to take all of this apart to get to the air filter, to get to the fuel filter. The priming bulb, as you can see, has this white stuff all over that. That's because this plastic, when it gets very, very dry, breaks. So I have a replacement one of these. Now, here's the issue with the parts. Parts for this particular model are not at your normal box store because they're very specific to this type of machine. Now, there's not a snowblower machine in every place. I didn't find one in Iowa, and I certainly haven't found one here in Maryland. They do exist in places like where you would get bikes and four-wheelers and heavier equipment. Haven't found one here in Maryland, so you have to order your parts online. Again, you have to go online, use the model number of the manufacturer, and you can get information from the manufacturer and some places for parts. Now, I ordered a whole bunch of parts, but it takes a long time to get to me because the particular parts vendor has all the parts come from their vendors to him. Then they pack it and they send it to you. That's the issue of drop ship. Usually they should be able to send it directly from the other vendor, but that is something I would cover in the classroom to show how transportation systems and delivery systems work. It does apply in that way. So the moral of this story is the parts that I have are on order. They are being shipped. It is going to take some time to get to me. So the majority of the work on this machine will be in tear down, an explanation of the overall unit, and then hopefully we'll get the replacement parts in here to show it working before the deadline. So just as before, I went online and purchased the operator's manual that I downloaded. Now, I actually bought this unit brand new, and where the operator's manual is, I have no idea. So I went online and got it. Now, the operator's manual, again, in similar fashion, has assembly and setup directions, and then some basic maintenance directions. It will go through its controls and features, and how to set it up properly, and it will instruct you how to operate everything. It'll also walk you through how to service the machine. Now, this doesn't have the schematic breakdown that the other unit had that gave the complete construction of it. And I could probably find it if I were looking it up. But I'm not going to worry about that here because I went over that on the last engine. Needless to say, we're going to start with some disassembly and then wait for our parts and do reassembly later. So our patient here, to review, basic service, a couple of items that are not working properly, and the next video will be when some disassembly has taken place.